I have never written fiction before. This is my first attempt. I do write nonfiction, so Gary had a need, I tried to fill the need, and here I am. Chapter 1, Jim Thornton. I sat on a bar stool waiting for Jim. I faced a wall of old wood paneling, partially hidden by bottles of booze sitting on nondescript metal shelving. The opposite wall was even worse. It was a sad relic of the bright neon look of the 1950s. The jukebox didn't work, and there was an old wooden phone booth that didn't work either. The bartender was in his 60s. The lights were dim, the kind of dim light that comes from too much smoke and grease covering the fluorescent bulbs. They flickered every now and then, almost as a reminder it could be worse. Long ago, the front door had stopped closing all the way. It swung open now, and Jim came in. He didn't look to the right or left, but his eyes darted around like a pinball in an arcade game. He was anxious, but then he was always anxious. Too much time in a war zone left him in a constant state of high readiness. Take him to a ball game, and all he did was scan the crowds. This was the reason I didn't take him to many ball games. I liked to watch the Sox play at Fenway. Still, I had my reasons for calling Jim. I liked him, and I owed him. All military operations require a high level of trust. Small teams like our former unit require absolute trust. You watch me, I watch you. The comm guy watches everything. After 3 years stateside, Jim is still too tightly wired. My business brain keeps telling me not to hire. It just doesn't register with the rest of me. As I said, I like him, and I owe him. So I use them on simple things, especially distance surveillance. Nothing too close to the target, no tight spaces, no pressure. Watch the house at night, watch the office during the day, vary the routine, change your clothing, maybe the color of your hair. When you move, move with the crowd. Jim could do this without thinking, but he had to be careful of one thing. Wherever he was, he had to hide his eyes. He wore dark glasses all the time. I had Jim's drinks waiting, straight bourbon, small beer chaser. He hated hard liquor, but both of us loved the calming effect. The beer washed away the taste of the bourbon, all was good. We took our drinks and walked to an empty table near the phone booth. He sat facing the door with an unobstructed line of sight. I asked the familiar question, "How you doing?" I received the familiar answer, "Okay." Then he would lead. "What do you have for me?" "A simple job," I would answer. "Yeah, another surveillance job." "Yes," I would say, "another surveillance job." "When are we going to get something interesting?" he would ask, as if he were reading from a script. But he already knew the answer. "We don't engage," I would say. And he would nod his head as if admitting that surveillance was all we were permitted to do. He wanted closure. He couldn't get closure. Looking back, I realized that I was lucky when I left the military. My head didn't explode. His did. I started a security agency. Nothing fancy, nothing to draw unwanted attention. We were hired to perform routine assignments. I was not happy, just busy. When he wasn't on assignment, Jim would sit in his apartment, waiting for someone to yell, "Incoming!" No one yelled. It never came. He couldn't understand why. I watched him as he drank. I pushed a printed page of details toward him. He looked, nodded, I pulled it back. He knew his assignment. Our target, Matty Felcher, worked in an insurance company, Colonial Art. Colonial insured expensive works of art. When Matty had started, experts were able to distinguish the real paintings from the forgeries. The criminals had become more sophisticated. Through all of this change, Colonial done a good job in limiting its losses, with one exception. Matty's share of insured losses was at least 2 standard deviations higher than the rest of the company. The statistic bothered his employer. His employer was sufficiently bothered to hire my firm, and I engaged Jim. It never occurred to me that there could be any real danger in this assignment. Art forgery was not a game played by thugs. It was a passionless, cerebral crime played by unarmed pros. But that is the thing about statistics. It never accounts for outliers. In this case, something went terribly wrong. The phone rang. I glanced up. It was almost 9 p.m. This was Jim's 4th day on the job, and I had talked to him earlier. I heard a very polite, controlled voice. Detective Fred McCourt, Boston Homicide. Did I know James Thornton? When I come to the precinct. It was late, and I was tired. Even worse, it was a cold fall night in Boston, and I had to wade through what once had been brightly covered leaves that were now pools of gray compost. I found my way to McCourt's office. Well-dressed, well-mannered, just the hint of a Boston accent on his 6-foot frame. He looked up casually. Yeah, I had engaged Jim. Yeah, he was on assignment. Yes, he had checked in earlier that evening. No, nothing was any different from his previous reports. Yes, I could identify the man in the black and white photograph. It was Jim. Missing his face. How could I be sure it was Jim? I pointed out where the now healed skin covered what had been deep wounds around Jim's face and neck. Silently, I thought, wounds he had received trying to protect me. What was my connection to Jim? What was his assignment? I answered the questions. I explained the surveillance of Manny Felcher. No, no one else was watching Felcher. Yes, I had known Jim for many years. Yes, we had served in the military together. No, I could not explain what we did in the military. His expression changed, and for the first time, McCourt may have allowed a bit of respect to enter in. He asked me to stop my work, no further contact. This was now a police matter. I said I understood. He started to ask me a second time. Then he looked at my face and decided to let it lie. I left the office. The cold night air hit me. I turned toward the curb and threw up. Jim's wife had left him. I knew how to reach his parents. I just didn't know what to say.